Morning, everyone. I'd like to read one of my favourite faith-building stories in the Bible. And it's about the life of a man which was so horrific that there seemed to be no hope for him. And I'm sure he often despairingly cried out, "How much longer have I got to live like this? How can I ever be free?" Now let's read the story from Mark chapter 5. Speaking about Jesus and his disciples, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and he broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and he fell on his knees in front of him. And he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." But Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." And then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. And those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and they told about the pigs as well. And then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus did not let him, but he said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And so the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. What an amazing and inspiring story. Life can get desperate for us sometimes, and we might wonder how much longer, how can things ever change? But this man's case was extreme. He was demon-possessed and the demons controlled him. He was a madman and he was treated like a wild animal. Many had tried to chain him and bind him in an attempt to control him. That was the medical treatment of the day, but to no avail. He was out of control. He was so strong that no one could restrain him. What a horrendous state to be in. How could things ever change for him? He lived in the tombs. What a morbid, scary, eerie, lonely, lifeless place to live. Tombs were out of the cities in remote, desolate places, and anyone who touched a grave was polluted according to the law. For 7 days they were deemed unclean, but actually, really, that was the least of his problems. He was an outcast of society for more than one reason, and he was made to live among the dead. Can we ever imagine it? How could that ever change? And his inner turmoil was indescribable. Verse 5 is the saddest verse. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. He got no relief. He was so tormented. How much worse could it be? He was isolated, no friends, no one to talk to, cut off from his family and his friends, no hope, no light at the end of the tunnel. How could it ever change? He had no hope in his heart, in his life. But change it did, because Jesus came into his life. One day, he saw a man from a distance getting out of a boat, and as he ran towards him, he heard the man say, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Can you imagine the hope that came into this man at that moment? At last, someone was actually dealing with this problem. He hadn't come to chain him up, he'd come to set him free. And what a day! No one else had been able to do it. Nobody else had the power or the authority to do it. But at the command of Jesus, something new was happening to him. The demons within him were afraid. They had come face to face with someone stronger than themselves, and they knew that this was the moment of their defeat. And the man fell at the knees before Jesus, and that which possessed him cried out, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." What a cheek! The demon or the demons knew who Jesus was, the Son of the Most High God. They knew his power. They were afraid of him. "Don't torture me." They had caused so much torture to this man. "Don't send me. Don't send us to the abyss." They knew they had an eternal destiny in the lake of fire, according to Matthew 25. But they said, "Send us into those pigs." They begged Jesus, "Send us into those pigs." And I've often read this story and wondered why Jesus bothered to have a conversation with the demons in this man. Why didn't he just cast them out and that be the end of it? But on contemplation, I'm glad he did, because through it, we actually get a lot more insight into the seriousness of this man's plight, the awesome power, the awesome power of Jesus and the limited power of Satan. This is how possessed the man was. When Jesus cast the demons out of him, they went into 2,000 pigs. Can you imagine it? When Jesus asked the evil spirit his name, he said in verse 9, "My name is Legion, for we are many." In the Roman military, a legion was between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers. The man had been tormented by thousands of demons, not just one. One would be bad enough, but thousands. We cannot even contemplate what that was like. Can you imagine the scene when the demons came out of that man at the command of Jesus and into the pigs? The pigs went crazy. What a sight that must have been. Pigs everywhere, totally out of control. Frenzied pigs running down the bank into Galilee. Can you imagine those who were tending the pigs, trying to control them? They wouldn't have known which way to turn. What a sight. But imagine. That's what had been in the man. How tormented he must have been. Would there have been any doubt that this man had been set free? In the man's mind and in the minds of the onlookers? Absolutely none. And there would have been no doubt about the power of Jesus to do this incredible miracle. Absolutely no doubt. No one had the power to do this sort of thing. Only God. And Satan didn't stand a chance against the power of God. His power is limited. Jesus caused quite a stir, didn't he? Imagine being one of his disciples beside him that day. I would have been shrieking at the sight of those pigs. Life certainly wasn't dull for the disciples as they followed Jesus around. They just landed on shore, having been in a really fierce storm on Galilee, and their boat had been nearly full of water, and they were terrified. But Jesus had rebuked the winds and the waves, and it had all calmed down. Imagine that. Even the winds and the waves obeyed him. And that would have been enough for one day. But now they were surrounded by mad pigs. Whatever was going to happen next. And understandably, those tending the pigs ran off to report what had happened to the pig owners and anyone else who would listen. And people came running to see what had happened. There was no sign. As they got there, there was no sign of the pigs, but the ground was all churned up where they'd been frenzied. And all that was left was their trail into Galilee. But there was the man, the greatest miracle of all, sitting with Jesus, dressed and in his right mind. What a shock! They had only ever known this man as a madman, but now he was changed. What a sight! I love it. The Bible says there was the man sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. No one else could do that. And can you imagine how the man himself felt? Can you imagine the conversation he and Jesus were having? Someone was actually talking to him after all this time, and he was able to talk back. Verse 16 says, those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. The pigs were part of the story that couldn't be left out. And then we read the saddest verse in the whole chapter, in my opinion, and it says this in verse 17, and then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. Jesus had come and caused a stir. He actually caused chaos. A man's life was restored and healed, but at the same time, a man's livelihood had been destroyed, and no doubt many people lost their jobs that day. And because the people didn't want any more calamity like this, they asked Jesus to leave their region. If he stayed, who could say what else might happen to the economy? Imagine how many more lives could have been impacted by Jesus, but they turned him away, and so he went. And there's a challenge. The people were willing to give up Jesus rather than their source of income. I wonder if they'd welcomed him and the pig owners came alongside him, how he would have helped them in their plight. What an opportunity lost. I love the last bit of this story, verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but he said to him, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And so the man went away and he began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. The Decapolis was 10 cities. Jesus couldn't go to all these places, but this man could, and he did. He didn't go to Bible college. He wasn't steeped in the Bible. He didn't have any training. He gossiped what had happened to him. He'd met Jesus and experienced his saving and cleansing work, and the fame of Jesus spread across the region. His testimony was enough. It was a living, walking, vivid, unanswerable demonstration of what God can do in a man. Your testimony is enough. The unanswerable proof of Christianity is a recreated man. I think he became the Susan Boyle of his time, famous overnight, but a much more incredible story. From the guttermost to the uttermost, such is the power of God to transform a life. As soon as Jesus met the man, hope came into his life, and this was a moment of change for him. 1 minute he was a madman, the next he was totally sane, dressed and in his right mind. In a moment of time, the demon-possessed man became an evangelist. How could it ever happen? It happened because Jesus touched him. Jesus saved the living from among the dead. No more living in the tombs. No more torment and agony. No more isolation. No more loneliness. No more shame. No more pity. No more sadness. No more an outcast. No more desperation. He was going home. He was going home to his family, maybe to a wife, children, mum and dad. He was going home to a house, to clothes, to food at the table, to friendship, to happy times, to laughing. When was the last time he'd done that? To hugs. When was the last time he'd had one of them? And the same Jesus who touched him and turned his life around is still changing lives today. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. The heart of Jesus is for everyone, rich or poor, educated or uneducated, famous or unknown, young or old. Jesus cares equally for all. He puts people on their feet again. He rekindles burnt out lives with fresh hope. He restores dignity and respect to people's lives. No one is beyond his loving touch, and his heart is the same today as it's always been. He wants to mend broken lives. He wants to heal the brokenhearted. He wants to bring light and hope to the desperate and fill that missing part in people's lives. I love that song of years ago, something beautiful, something good. All my confusion he understood. All I had to offer him was brokenness and strife, but he made something beautiful of my life. We all need the touch of Jesus in our lives. We might not be in a desperate plight like this man, but we still need God. There is a God-shaped part in all of us that needs to be filled with him, and that's when we will be complete. So I want to encourage you today to run towards Jesus. And when we become Christians, we still constantly need the touch of Jesus in our lives. We need renewing, refreshing, edifying, comforting, strengthening in this world in which we live. Many of us can say if it wasn't for God, we'd be nowhere. The flood would have engulfed us, the torrent would have swept over us, the raging waters would have swept us away, but our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. God can do it again and again and again. He's the same God today as he always has been. Yesterday, now today, and forever the same. There's no reason to doubt God can do it again. A demon-possessed man became an evangelist. How could it ever happen? It happened because of Jesus. He is the God of the impossible. What is impossible with man is possible with God. May we, like this man, constantly be running towards Jesus for his touch upon us. God bless you this week.